Hello, my name's Georgie Newbery. I'm a flower farmer and florist based between fashionable Bruton and up and coming Wincanton here in miserable, wet and disgusting Somerset. And I'm doing some Christmas flowers for a client. Now, she has very specific requirements for her flowers. And what makes them interesting for me is the foliage. So it is the 23rd of December and I have got lots of lovely flowers, but I've also got some really good foliage. These are not especially Christmassy flowers, but they are very wintry flowers. So if you'd like to see how I do it, come along for the ride. By the way, if you do please subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon and we'll tell you when we've got new clips coming up. And if you find any of the tips and tricks I give you as I go along useful, you can always buy me a coffee. The link for coffee buying is in the blurb to all my clips. Right, enough of this chat, let's get going. Now, I was very inspired by my friend Thomas Broom Hughes, who I met years ago working at Petersham Nurseries. And he said the other day that he always uses Magnolia grandiflora for foliage in his winter arrangements. And I thought, brilliant, what a good idea. Because look, it's very structural and nice, good shine on it, and also strong. It's going to make a nice shape in my vases. So I've cut a bit of mine. We planted a Magnolia grandiflora when we were married in 2006. We were given a Magnolia grandiflora by some neighbours as a Christmas present. So, as a wedding present rather. So we planted it and it's now big enough to cut a few bits off. Don't tell Fabrizio, he'll be furious. I also have, note the way I'm just chucking the foliage away. That's because at this time of year, it's very strong. It doesn't need to be in water while it waits. Lovely scented rosemary. Again, structural, interesting, little bit silvery. I have cut 3, so I'm very specific about how much I cut. I've got 2 big arrangements to make and 4 posies. So I've cut 3 stems of each for the big arrangements and 1 each for the posies. So there's a consistency to the look. So I want them to look gardenish, but I don't want them to look chaotic. Does that make sense? So I have cut 10 stems of everything. So that's 3 each for the big arrangements and 1 each for the posies. Rosemary, yum. Bay, more scent. We planted the bay some years ago. We got the bay trees all from a lovely nursery down in in Devon, just the other side of Exeter from us, called Hill House Nursery. And I had made friends with Sasha, who runs it. And I made friends with her on the old Twitter. I made a lot of friends on Twitter over the years. So when we were in the market for shrubs for the flower farm, naturally, I asked her and her lovely, sadly no longer with us, husband to supply us. And they brought us up these amazing shrubs. The bay trees were probably 2 foot high at the time. And then now, so this would have been about 2011, 12. And they're now at least 10 foot high. So they're making a nice windbreak as well as providing really good cutting material. So bay is fantastic. It smells delicious. This is one of my absolute favourites, Brachyglottis. Anybody who's been on any of my workshops would tell you I'm always banging on about Brachyglottis because it's pretty much bomb-proof, and I hammer it. It'll take from cuttings very, very easily. So you don't have to order masses of plants. You can make cuttings from the plants you've got very quickly. And I cut it and cut it and cut it and cut it. And again, it's got this silvery edge. It's a nice, slightly velvety feel to the leaves, very tough, but really attractive. And that, my friends, no, there's more. I knew there was something else. And this, Gristolinia. And the reason I like this is, look, you can see it on this stem. It's got a nice yellow stem, which makes it sort of springy. It's a really nice spring green. At this time of year, to have a bit of fresh green is really, really useful. And then because I'm not especially doing Christmassy, I've cut Curly Whirly Willow, which again, we had, when we came here, there were a couple of these in the garden, and we propagated them literally by cutting stems and sticking them in the ground. And because we're very wet here, they've grown incredibly well. But it's lovely, again, more structure and interest and movement for my arrangements. And as with everything, I'm going to start with greening up the vases. But first of all, I'm going to show you the vases. Now, the jam jars for my posies are just ordinary jam jars, but they are actually 8-ounce jam jars. So if you're going to make jam, they would take 8 ounces of jam. The reason I like them is they've got edges to them, and that means they catch the light. And when there's a fat posy here, you don't really see the jar top. They just look like quite attractive little vases. And I will cover the top. This particular client likes a ribbon around the top of her jars. And so I will cover the top with a little bit of a ribbon. But they're very good as little vases. And then the big vases for this particular client, and she has these every week, I will tell you, I like a pedestal vase because it makes the whole arrangement look lighter. So even when it's a very small pedestal like this, I really like it. But these are great hurricane lamp vase shapes. And I'll tell you where they're from. And they've got them in stock right now this minute if you want them. Morrison's. If you're in the UK, go to your local supermarket, Morrison's, and they've got these vases in. I will be pinging along later and just buying a few more because they're really, really useful. Look, and you'll see the proportions later, but there's my hand. So they're quite big. I mean, that's nearly a foot high. They're really useful. So first of all, I'm going to green up the vases. This is a technical term we use here at Common Farm, greening up. And I'm going to start with the Magnolia grandiflora because it's the biggest foliage and it's going to give me the biggest stand for everything to lean against. And when I've greened them up, I'll show you how they look, because hopefully they'll look so attractive that if you wanted to, you could just walk around your garden and pick a load of foliage and put it in a vase. And I think it looks very attractive. You see, that's just Magnolia grandiflora. I think that's stunning on its own. And there are my 2 vases filled with foliage. I'd say, I think foliage is really, really lovely in a vase. One of the things that will improve this is by keeping the stems of the foliage clean. So can you see that there are no leaves under the water? And that really helps, A, keep the arrangement looking light, but it also stops the water going manky. And one of the attractive things about this, I think, is that the water is clean. And you can change the water every day if you want to. And that would really, really help everything look fresh as well as keep fresh. But look at the lovely variations in the colours. And I like the height that the Curly Whirly Willow gives us, which in technical terms here at Common Farm is called twiggery pokery. Anyway, there are the bases, and I'm now going to add some flowers. But I have a thing called the 30 stem challenge. And I bet you, if you went into your garden, you could find some stems of foliage, even in these dark wintry days, and some interesting twigs. And you too could make an arrangement just like this. And it's just fresh, isn't it? Anyway, I'm going to add some flowers and we'll see how we go. So there are the arrangements with added flowers. And the flowers I've added are these lovely alstroemeria, which will come out, Peruvian lilies, white. They're all white, double tanacetum. This These are all from B.J. Richards Flowers, Highcroft Nurseries, just the other side of the Tamar from here. But the seed for this little double feverfew, you can get, I know, from Chiltern Seeds. Little white ranunculus, white tulips, and I think that's it. Little, oh yes, and little white, look, they will come out. Little paper white narcissi. And my client loves white flowers, so that's obviously why I'm doing white flowers for her. But I also think that white flowers at this time of year really glow in the gloomy light. I mean, even in here with, you know, a big old light and the overhead lights, it's still quite dark in here because it's the middle of the winter. And you can see how the white of the flowers really shows up against the foliage. So if you're looking for flowers for a deep midwinter arrangement, then I really recommend white, because if the lights are off in a room or you only have side lights, then they really glow like little stars. Anyway, there we are. Now I'm going to make some posies and then I'll get them out for delivery. Now here's a top tip. I've made a little posy. This is 20 stems and I've cut it off really short. So disproportionately short for the posy, but that means that when I put it, I'm not left-handed, so woo! When I put it in its little vase, can you see? The stems don't reach the bottom of the vase, and that gives the whole feeling of the posy. It's a sweet little posy, and it gives it a feeling of lightness. And it's a bit like the hurricane lamp vases that I've done the big arrangements in. Also, because they've got that little pedestal, it means that none of the stems on the loosely made arrangements in the vases, none of the stems touch the bottom, and it gives it a light feeling. And again, I think, especially at this time of year, flowers can look a bit heavy. And so by having white flowers, fresh greenery, but also not touching the bottom of the vase, you keep a feeling of lightness. It's as though they're dancing a little bit. I know this sounds really silly, but it's true. There we are. So that's the first of 4. On we go. And the other thing I've done for these little posies is I've made sure that the stems are stripped of all the extra foliage, because again, I want to keep the water in the vases clean very quickly, especially in central heating. If there's manky old foliage under the water line, it'll rot, and that makes the water cloudy and smelly, which is not part of the deal. It's not what you want. So these posies, my lovely client, who's had flowers from me for years and years and years, knows that to keep these flowers going, and they will go for over a week, all she needs to do is keep the water fresh. So she will tip the water out, rinse the little vases out, and give them fresh water every day. And it'll make all the difference to how long they last. Take my word for it. The other thing you could do is re-snip the stems, just a tiny little bit off the stems every day. And that helps keep the cellulose drinking cells open so that the flowers can keep fresh. There you are. Top tips you didn't know you needed. So there we are. They're all finished. And I finished them off. I finished the posies off with this lovely bronze ribbon. It's not bright and it's not in your face, but it finishes them off very nicely. I think they're going into bedrooms. So, you know, the bronze will go with anything, but I think that's very attractive. It's grosgrain ribbon or Petersham ribbon, depending on where you're getting it from or what you like to call it. But there you are, 2 large arrangements, 4 small posies, and you see how the white flowers really glow in the gloom. I hope you've enjoyed this. So thank you very much for joining me today. Please do subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, and we'll tell you when we've got new clips coming up. And if any of the tips and tricks I've given you today are useful, you can always buy me a coffee. The link is in the blurb. Obviously, it's not a real coffee. It's just like a way of supporting making the clips, which encourages me to make more. Anyway, thanks very much, and I will see you soon. Happy days.